With Ms. Swartz. Today we're going to be looking at the quadratic formula. So what we've looked at so far is ways that we can solve quadratic equations in these few forms. So we have had ax squared plus c equals 0. And with this, we tried to solve using square roots. Then yesterday we completed this square, so it looked like this: x squared plus bx equals 0. And we didn't want that coefficient out in front. And today what we're looking at is, okay, how can I solve any quadratic that I've given? Okay, so we haven't necessarily done it now, but we can also solve by factoring these out. Okay, but factoring doesn't always work either. So today what we're going to learn is the quadratic formula, which allows you to pretty much solve any equation that you'll be given. So our essential question is, how can you derive a formula that can be used to write the solutions of any quadratic equation in standard form? So I'm going to tell you or show you the quadratic formula here. It is a little complicated, but once you get used to it, it gets pretty easy, and you probably, honestly, will start to memorize it. Okay, so the real solutions of a quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c are equal to 0, are, okay, and this is going to give you the solutions every single time. Okay, so x equals negative b, so we would take negative b, plus or minus, remember there's generally going to be 2, the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So yes, sounds complicated, but you just have to plug those numbers in. And so we'll be able to use this for any equation given, and we can plug this information in and get out our solution. So let's look at an example of this. So the part that makes the quadratic formula maybe a little cumbersome is that you have to write it all out and actually do the work. There's a lot to it. So if I write this out, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, there was a time I had this memorized, and you will eventually get there. Okay, so negative b is going to be a positive 5 because this is a negative 5. And then we have plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared, minus 4 times 2 times 3 all over 2 times 2. As you can see, this is a lot. You need to take your time and actually do your math correctly here. So 5 plus or minus, well, negative 5 squared is 25, minus, okay, so 4 times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24, all over 4. Okay, so we have 5 plus or minus the square root of 1 over 4. So what is the square root of 1 so that we can get two answers here? Well, we would have x is equal to 5 plus 1 over 4, and we would have x is equal to 5 minus 1 over 4. So we would get here 6 excuse me, 6 over 4, which is equal to 3 halves. And here 4 over 4, or 1. So these would be our answers. You can obviously check these by plugging these in. So 1 squared is 1, 2 times 1 is 2, minus 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3. So we get negative 3 plus 3, and that does in fact equal 0. Okay, so we have more examples we can do, but the nice part about this is, and this is my favorite part about algebra, is if you do the steps correctly every single time, it works every single time. So let's try this one. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now, I've had it memorized, but I'm not going to expect you to memorize it. It will be given to you on your test. Okay, so this is going to be positive 6 plus or minus negative 6 squared minus 4 times a is 1 times c is 5 over 2 times 1. As you can see, you need a lot of space for this. So we'd have the square root of 36 minus 20 over 2. So we have x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 16 over 2. So again, now we have two options, so I'm going to break it out. I'm just going to go into this space and we'll just do one of those down there. So x is going to equal 6 plus 4 over 2, and x is going to equal 6 minus 4 over 2. So 10 over 2 gives us 5, and 2 over 2 gives us 1. Perfect. Okay, so let's try number 3. All right, so same concept, write out your formula. Negative 2 plus or minus 2 squared minus 4 times negative 3 times 7 over, oops, almost forgot to write that in the formula up here, 2 times negative 3. I'm going to go over into this space. So we would have x equals negative 2 plus or minus 4 minus, so negative 4 times negative 3 is negative 12 times 7 would be 84, negative 84, all over negative 6. Sorry, I'm running out of room. Get some of this out of the way. Okay, continue my math here. Negative 2 plus or minus, so I'm going to add, so I get 88 over negative 6. Alright, so now this isn't a perfect square, so that kind of changes the game a little bit. But we can simplify this fraction. So essentially what we would have, negative divided by negative, is plus or minus square root of 88 over 3. Okay, so if it's not a perfect square, you can leave it in those terms. Why did I simplify this? 2 6 simplifies to 1/3. So I lost my 1. You could have a 1 out there, but it's negative 2 6 over negative 2 over negative 6, so I get a positive, and I just don't write the 1. Well, I guess you could write the 1. 1 plus square root of 88 over 3, and 1 minus the square root of 88 over 3. That's fine. That's a good answer here. Okay, so this is a really good chart. I just want to kind of look at it really quickly, and then we can look at a couple ways to solve some equations. So these are some ways that we can solve quadratic equations. Factoring, which we did in chapter 7, we did a lot of. When your equation can be easily factored, it makes it really easy to solve. So maybe an example of that. Okay, so we could factor this to solve this equation. X plus 4 and 1. So then I could set both of those equal to 0. So my x would equal negative 1 and my x would equal negative 4. So that's an example of where factoring may be a really good way to solve. Graphing, you could graph to solve. We didn't talk too much about this, but the solving, x is going to be where it hits the x-axis, obviously. So if you have a parabola and it looks like this, these would be your solutions. But, okay, Sometimes it's hard to see where those are at, if it's a square root, if it's not exactly on a point. So it may not give exact solutions, could be some disadvantages. And then for the factoring, some disadvantages could be some equations are not factorable. So we can't even do that first piece. The other one we learned a couple days ago was square roots. So if it's in this form, that works, but it can only be used for certain equations. So that's one piece. It has to kind of be in either this or written like that. Okay. Completing the square, it's best when a equals 1, so sometimes that's not the case, and it can have difficult calculations, as some of you saw. It's also best when b is even, because when you're dividing by 2, that makes things easier. So if it's odd, it makes it a little tricky. So the one good thing about the quadratic formula that we learned today is it can be used for any quadratic equation and gives exact solutions. So the only disadvantage would be it takes a lot of time and a lot of space on paper to do it, but it's gonna work for any type that you see. So it would work for all of these. Maybe these would be easier, but the quadratic formula would always work. So I have a couple more examples and then we'll be done. Some of these it may be better to use different types, but we're going to look at that. Okay, so this says solve the equation using any method. We might talk about the method of choice, but here's something to realize. We could use the quadratic formula for all of these. So to use the quadratic formula for a here, all I would have to do is subtract 1 from both sides, and now I have the quadratic. I have an a, a b, and a c, and I could use negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if I wanted to do that, I would be 10 plus or minus square root of negative 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 1 all over 2 times 1. So I'd have 10 plus or minus 100 minus, will actually be plus 4 over 2. So I'd have x equals 10 plus or minus square root of 104, I believe, over 2. So to simplify that, I'd have 5 plus or minus the square root of 104. And with this, what we have to realize is 104 is not simplified. So I'm actually going to backtrack. I'm going to erase that part here because we want to keep that 2 down there if we have anything else to simplify. So I can simplify 104. It has a factor, a perfect square factor of 4 times 26. Okay, so I'd have 10 all over 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 26 over 2. So now I can simplify. I got to simplify this piece and this piece. So I'd have 5 plus or minus the square root of 26. So those would be my 2 answers. Now, is that the best way that I could solve that? Probably not. I would probably want to complete the square here. So you could try completing the square and you should get the same answer, and it might be a little easier. So for B, I want you to use the quadratic formula. Sorry about the bell. Try that one on your own and show me if you have some time. For C, if you have time, you could try to factor this one and it would be really easy. So go ahead and try those. All right. Our homework, I will let you know when everybody is kind of done. Have a great day.